Patience as always. I say I'm going to start at a certain time, and then, of course, that doesn't ever really happen. Let me get some coffee real quick. Captivating podcasting, I know. It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a rainy election day. Happy election day, everybody. This is not going to be a political podcast. 4 years ago, I dipped my toe into that, but you have plenty of avenues for that. You don't need a Illini sports podcast to deliver political commentary. So I'm not going to do that today. I just hope that you do what you got to do as a citizen, and that's all I have to say about that. I think Forrest Gump said something like that. Illini basketball is back, and it feels really good. I went to the State Farm Center last night, hence the No Second Half Reaction podcast, and that's why we're doing it this morning. Day off of school for me in Champaign Unit 4 and other school districts too. And when I stepped into the State Farm Center and took my seat, the music is blasting out of the speakers, and I took my seat just as the starting lineups began and the lights go out and all the pomp and circumstance that are associated with that. And it just felt really good to be back. And I texted Trevor and Isaac, Illini football, a lot of fun. When it's good, it feels really good, but nothing quite touches this. Illini basketball at the State Farm Center. Good crowd, all things considered, on what was a really bad weather night, and a not great opponent in EIU. And all these new toys to watch. And 2 years ago, it wasn't all that different. We had all these new talented guys on the team. We had some really impressive freshmen that we felt like were the future of the program. So what I want to try to do is caution myself and not get too far down the rabbit hole that I did 2 years ago when I was really bullish on that team, thinking that just by sheer talent, they were going to achieve more than Brad Underwood's previous 3 teams had. That didn't quite happen with the Matthew Meyer, Terrence Shannon, Jaden Epps, Sky Clark team, all the other guys that were on there as well, most of whom, and actually all of whom, if I think about it, are not going to be playing this year. And we'll get to Ty Rodgers in a bit. But as we sit down and the game begins, and EIU, they score a few early buckets, and you're thinking, oh boy, the defense is going to be a thing all year. And it might still be a thing all year. Once Illinois got comfortable in that game and you started to see your uber-talented players, especially from an offensive standpoint, begin to assert themselves, that's when the fun really began. And, of course, you consider the opponent. You say it's EIU. What can you really garner or glean from a game like that? And I don't have a good answer at this point as to can we project anything forward based on what happened against the Panthers. I will say this, though. From an eye test perspective alone, when it comes to size, when it comes to offensive skill, athleticism, this is one hell of a collection. And we were so excited this offseason, and I think for good reason, based on just the measurables of each of these guys, 6'6", 6'7", and above, like a Tomislav, Ivisic, and I hope I get the pronunciations a little bit better as these podcasts go on. So you got the size. You have the skill that popped out at you on these YouTube clips, but then you see it in person, and there's just a raw skill in a lot of these younger guys. But what I am encouraged by in a way that I wasn't 2 years ago, there is some polish to their games. A common narrative this year will be that this is a young Illinois team, and in some ways that's accurate. But it's not young in the way that it was 2 years ago, where you had a 4-man freshman class, and your backcourt was mostly comprised of freshmen, Sky Clark, Jaden Epps, Sincere Harris to a lesser degree. And I'm looking at this year's freshmen, 2 of whom are Europeans, and I guess Ivisic is technically a sophomore after he got cleared by the NCAA, but regardless, first-year player. And you're seeing that these freshmen, quote-unquote, aren't the same kinds of freshmen you would get out of a 4-year American high school. Ivisic and Jakucionis, let's see if I got that right, KJ, they're pros. That's what they are. And then you look at the other two freshmen in Will Riley and Morez Johnson. Now, Morez is raw, but 6 blocks in his debut tells you this dude is a dude, and I think a fan favorite right off the bat. You could sense that last night when he checked in and the ovation he got. And Will Riley, who we named this podcast after, a true 5-star. And that's what 5 stars look like. So that's your freshman class. You compare and contrast KJ, Ivisic, Will Riley, and Morez Johnson to Jaden Epps, Sky Clark, Ty Rodgers, Sincere Harris. And the difference is night and day. So yeah, young team, I'll grant you that. But I don't think they'll run into the same issues as they did 2 years ago. Now, that is not to say that this team won't have issues as they go along. And the good thing about the 2022 season is that it sort of prepared you for, or 22-23, it prepared you for the fact that when you get all these new pieces together, sometimes it'll work out beautifully and other times it will look a mess. And that's going to happen. It might happen as soon as the Alabama game, which is game 4, or Arkansas on Thanksgiving. These tests along the way are going to be measuring stick games, and I don't know how they're going to go in the early going of this season. But if this team is to maximize the potential that they have, which seems to me quite vast, then this is going to be a really fun Big Ten season. I had a chat last night with Trevor and Isaac via text. I think Trevor is cautioning himself on this team, and that's probably a smart thing. I've told Trevor before, I appreciate the fact that you don't jump, as John Gross would say, 10 toes in. You take a wait-and-see approach. And meanwhile, even though I'm older than Trevor, I'm 38, pushing 40, I still have that tendency to get so excited and think, this is it. This is the team that's going to do it, right? And I don't know which one of us will be proven to be more correct. Probably somewhere in between, which is to say, I think this team can very much be a second weekend of the NCAA tournament team if things go well. I think they can compete for a Big Ten title. At the same time, I'm not going into the season expecting either of those things. We got to see it. And I think that was Trevor's point. We got to see it, and until I see it, I'm going to have some questions. But man, opponent aside, it was the kind of game that is just tantalizing as a basketball fan, and one that was following this offseason with Brad Underwood and thinking, man, this quite a collection of talent he's getting here, so how does it all look on the court? And it just feels like once they really kind of find themselves, the product that we see on the court has the potential to be consistently great. Now, this might be a one-year stopgap, but you know what? The way college basketball is now, and the way that Brad Underwood and Orlando Antigua and Jeff Alexander and I forget the third assistant's name, sorry. The way that staff is going to operate going forward is probably lending itself to this ability to reload year in, year out. And, of course, there's a risk with that. The lack of continuity can bite you. But I don't know, man. Talent wins, which sounds like duh, like the most obvious analysis that I could probably give you. Talent wins. No kidding, Carp. But, man, just look at the team that won it all last year, Connecticut. And, sure, Hurley is a generational coach. I mean, you win 2 championships in a row. There's no other way to put it. I just feel like Brad Underwood could find some success, if not quite to that caliber or quite to that level, where he is turning this program into one that can make Final Fours. And I don't want to say with regularity, but with semi-regularity, just based on the sheer talent he can bring in. And if last night is any indication, every offseason is going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And then the first time we go back to the State Farm Center in early November, each and every year, we're going to have 5 or 6 new toys to look at and ooh and ah about. So today, we're going to talk about the first game of the year, the roster as we see it so far, a few concerns, one that I think is pretty obvious and not what I was necessarily expecting coming into the season, and how this might project forward, which might be a fool's errand, but what the heck, we're going to try that anyway. All right, the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. Going to hit that up tonight for an election night meal. Just feel like all the noise going on with it, my wife and I decided let's just go enjoy a good meal, regardless of outcome. And there's no place we would rather go than Hamilton Walker's Steak, Seafood, and Spirits in downtown Champaign. I think tonight what we're going to do is we love Caesar salads. I think we're going to split their fish of the day, which I hope is their Chilean sea bass, which I've had before. I had it before the book release event. It is honestly one of the best entrees I've ever had. And I'll have an old-fashioned. Wife's going to have a martini. And I will say, from all the places in town, she's had a few martinis. She says that's the best one. I've had a few old-fashions, more than a few. That's the best one for my money as well. Hamilton Walker's in downtown Champaign. Also, got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well. We've been working with Brian now for a few years since we moved into this house, and just easy to work with. Great State Farm prices, comparable to any other insurance company. Cannot recommend Brian enough, not just as a person, but an insurance agent. brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. We got our heating furnace check scheduled for a week or two from now. So far, it's been working great. Not surprised. We've been working with Dogtown for a couple years now, but always nice to have them come and check out our HVAC system, which, since we've been working with them, has been in better condition than ever. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. And finally, Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Luke and his staff, great craftsmen. The customer service, I think, the way that they can get back to you quickly on whatever project you're working on, separates them from other contractors. So get a gallery, or check out a gallery, I should say, of their excellent work online at owenbuildersllc.com. And while you're there, you can get a free quote at owenbuildersllc.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them and appreciate you. And a reminder, now the basketball season is here. Get the 200 level book if you haven't already. Sales have been really great on Amazon. We got our second shipment coming into game day. If you're local, Game Day Spirit, Jane Addams Bookstore, and The Lit in downtown Champaign, they have those available. And if you're anywhere else in the world, Amazon has hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audiobook. So we got all the formats out there as well. So good morning, Jacob and Scott and a few others there in the feed. I don't know if anyone else has Election Day off like I do. It's funny because sort of like Super Bowl Sunday, I would rather the following day be the day off, because I don't know what we're going to learn tonight. If past elections are any indication, this is going to either be a late night or a long week. My money's on the latter. Now, with Illinois basketball, let's talk about the big news from yesterday before we get back to the game. Ty Rodgers, redshirting this year. And bummer. Not surprising. I would not have went so far as to predict that, because it's pretty presumptive to say this guy, based on the 9-10 deep that you have, isn't going to get enough tick, so therefore he's going to redshirt. He was your most seasoned veteran coming back, third-year junior that started every game last year, was it? But if you watch the exhibition game against Ole Miss, one of the weird takeaways I had from that was, and it felt, I don't know, I didn't know how much basis there was for me to feel this way from an exhibition game. He looked like a fish out of water. It just didn't look like it fit. Ty is a bulldog. He's a tough kid. I say kid, he's a man. He's a junior. And the rest of this roster, though, athletic guys that can score. When Ty is out there, just like it was last year, you are 4.5 against 5 on offense. And yes, Ty had a few games where he got double digits. Some games he was pretty good around the rim. I think in the Michigan State games especially, he was really good. But unfortunately, even by the end of the season in the NCAA tournament, you just could not count on him even scoring around the rim. Teams knew that if Ty Rodgers has the ball, the worst he can do with it is try to take it down there and bully you for a layup. But that's not going to work against UConn and the Iowa States of the world. So on one hand, I feel bad because he is a throwback to a more traditional era of college basketball. You sign on to a program, you commit to it, and you stick with it. And there's a chance, I suppose, where he does stick with it, and everything that Brad Underwood said last night is that we hope he stays, that he's going to work on his offensive game, and it seemed like a mutual understanding. That would be hard for someone like Ty, who is a 4-star kid out of high school, highly touted recruit that was choosing between Illinois and Michigan State. His offensive prowess was never his strength. He didn't come out of high school as some guy that you knew was going to bury a bunch of threes or be able to take it to the rim at will. But you just figured that all the other intangible qualities and his size, he would eventually develop that. But so far, he hasn't. There was a clip in the offseason of him making a 3 or 2 in practice. Listen, always be wary of off-season reports and off-season videos. Though for a lot of the other clips that we saw, that actually seems to have borne out in what we saw with KJ and Tomislav and Will Riley, just all this other talent that you have. But Ty, great of a guy as he is, would be an easy jersey to buy. Doesn't fit. And it's cruel. It's cruel, and it's cold, and it's what professional sports is more like than collegiate. I will say, though, that I appreciate the fact that you have a coach that would be willing to have a conversation like that. On one hand, I mentioned the word cold, calculated, professional, and if that irks you, I understand. But Brad Underwood is in this business to win championships. And I'm saying all this, it's like, geez, Carp, don't become a walking salesman for Brad Underwood. I've been critical of him before. I'll be critical of him this year. I guarantee it. But one thing about his approach that I do like is his adaptability to this era of college basketball. And to me, this just screams, I got to win now. And every year is a win now proposition. Does Ty Rodgers help you win more games this year? I don't know if he does. I made a joke with Trevor and Isaac last night on our text thread. There's a Simpsons episode where Bleeding Gums Murphy, the local jazz man that Lisa looks up to, dies. And Homer is consoling Lisa, and he's like, remember when our dog or cat died and we went back to the pound and we got a new one? Well, we'll just go down to the pound and get you a new jazz man. Of course, that didn't make Lisa feel any better. She starts crying even more after that. Poor Homer. But I had that thought last night for some reason watching Trey White, who was not great, but showed that he has some offensive game and really is the same kind of rebounder and defender that Ty Rodgers is, with a little more athleticism. And it just occurred to me that Trey White is essentially like, okay, well, you don't have Bleeding Gums Murphy anymore, so you go get a new jazz man. Well, Ty Rodgers wasn't scoring for you, so go get a new Ty Rodgers. In this case, Trey White. And when you got Will Riley, who you will have to play 25 minutes a game. You will have to. Where does Ty fit? And the short answer is he doesn't. That sucks. I was talking to my niece last night at the game and trying to explain to her and realized that, God, how do you explain to a kid that, she's a 6th grader. She's at that age where you really look up to these players. And Ty was an easy one to look up to. Just probably the easiest guy to root for on last year's team, all things considered, because you knew that he was doing as much as he could with a limited tool set. But I don't know, at the risk of sounding cold, to use that word again, it is what it is. And you are not short of wing talent. Do you even want to throw maybe Kerry Booth in there as a possible 3? If you want to go with a big lineup, Kerry Booth drains a few threes last night. He looks the part. Ty, I love you, but even just the eye test, it's different. My niece asked, how was it that Ty Rodgers could play every game last year on a really good team, and he's not good enough for this one? And that's a fair question. Last year's team and the makeup of that roster was predicated on Terrence and Marcus being your 1A, 1B. And everyone else could be kind of complimentary in that regard. But remember, towards the end of the season, it wasn't Ty getting as much crucial minutes as Luke Goody. And if Luke had been healthy all year, I wonder if that would have happened a little bit before that. Luke started to play a little bit of defense. He was rebounding well at the tail end of the season. Oh, and he could shoot threes. When you have a guy out there that just is not a risk to shoot threes, and look at the shot chart last night. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I sound like Trump right there. The shot chart, it was beautiful, beautiful shot chart. All threes and layups. I don't know if there was a mid-range jumper taken by Illinois yesterday. Not that Ty Rodgers would take mid-range jumpers. But Illinois will probably shoot 25, 33s a game. I think Brad Underwood said last night, if we shoot 50, that's fine. And you might be thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. What's that all about? But really think about it. This is the way the college basketball offenses are heading. We recruited shooters specifically to do this, and that's where Ty is the odd man out. Is Ty ever going to play another game as an Illini? Probably not. Unless he exponentially improves at the three, I don't see a conversation between him and Brad Underwood before next season that is anything but, hey, Ty, I'm not sure where your role is on this team. And that's a bummer. I also wonder, how was this not foreseen? I guess you want to get everybody on campus and see how they're playing, and I'm sure Ty did too. Ty was probably pretty confident that he would be a starter. I thought that just for appearance's sake, he'd be a starter too, but that Trey White would eventually take those minutes. But then it's funny, all these preseason projections in my mind, I kept forgetting about the 5-star wing that came in on July 1st, or committed on July 1st. And that, I think, more than anything, changed the calculation here. But again, you got to wait and see until they get on campus what it's going to be like. And if you're Ty, do you transfer in September, October? Can you? I'm not even sure what the rules would be for that. But Ty, good luck to you. If he sticks, that'd be great. If he improves his offensive game and is a key part of next year's team, awesome. I'm sure he's going to be a great guy in the sideline all year. But that is just the cruel reality of college basketball, but more specifically at the level that Brad Underwood wants this team to play at. All right, let's see here. A couple things in the chat thread. This is from Jacob. Ty Rodgers' offense doesn't fit with the rest of the team. That's just it, Jacob. And Scott says Ty's not a Big Ten player. I don't know about that, Scott, but I did ask myself, if Ty were to transfer, if he were in the transfer portal right now, how many Big Ten teams would say, I want that guy to be a key part of the rotation? I think about half. He would have a role somewhere, but it would be with a team, I think, more in the middle of the pack, or a team that is not predicating their style as much as Illinois is on offense. Real quick before we get to the game itself and what we saw from the players, you know what's also exciting about this era of Illini basketball? I don't think it's ever going to be boring. It might drive you nuts. Games where the defense is lacking. Yeah, it could drive you nuts like it did in mid-February last year. They won't bore you, though. That offense, when it's clicking, is going to just be fun as hell to watch. And I guess some nights where you aren't making your threes, that, again, maddening, but boring? I don't think so. I like that there is a set identity. Certain things will change, right? The NIL environment will always keep things in flux, but it seems as if Brad Underwood has decided, no matter what else is going on, whatever external factors are at play, we are going to be a program with an offensive identity. Shooters and guys that can take it to the hole. Now, of course, every program wants that, but this is where Illinois does have an advantage with the NIL budget that I presume they have, and with Brad Underwood's success so far in the NIL era. I have few questions that he can get guys to fit that system. And when you look at how this roster was constructed in the offseason, the one consistent thing was this: offensive skill across the board. There wasn't, let's just go get a defensive stopper. None of that crap. No, all these guys are shooters, or at least capable of being shooters. And we saw that play out last night. All right, let's talk about the good and the bad from yesterday. Let's start with the good. Ivisic, I think is how you pronounce it. He is a pro. I mentioned that about him and KJ, and they look like guys that have been playing semi-pro or young professional leagues in Europe. Ivisic has the size. It pops off on your screen or in person especially. He has the size. But he's remarkably lithe and quick for a big man. He's not Kofi. I love Kofi. We all love Kofi. There's a reason his jersey's in the rafters. But what I like about Ivisic is he runs the court well. He is very, very good with the ball in terms of like being able to maneuver when it's just him and his defender and try to back him down. I was really impressed with that last night. Great passer. And Kofi had some of that too. Kofi got really good as a passer later in his career. But more than that, it's the threat that a guy like Ivisic can shoot a three or get an easy layup. And we saw both of those on display last night. My favorite play down low from him was a rebound off a missed free throw. He just towers up, gets the rebound. I know against certain opponents he won't be able to do that. Against Eastern, he certainly could. But he gets the putback and gets fouled on the way up. Looks to have a good stroke at the free throw line. That was a common thread last night for Illinois that shot very well from the free throw line, and they got plenty of opportunities. So to me, that's a guy that is just polished. He's ready to go. And he will be, I think, your second leading scorer this year, based on consistency. Now, your first, well, what would I say? Your first option offensively is going to be KJ. And what I was most impressed with from him last night was less so his shooting, which is going to be fine, and less so his ability to get to the rim, which is going to be fine. He's a point guard. None of this combo guard business. This guy is a point guard that can create his own shot, but I think even more impressively create for others. There were probably 4 or 5 assists last night that should have been his if we would have just made the shot, because it seemed like there was a lid on the basket in the first half. To me, those two guys, you can set in stone. I don't care about their age. I know Ivisic is a little bit older, but KJ is only 18, 19. I don't care about that. Those guys, I think you will be able to count on this year. And I know that Robert, for example, had a tweet about the physicality of EIU, because EIU just said, we're going to muck it up, and I get it. And that KJ had a few expressions on his face like, whoa, what the hell is this? And maybe or maybe not, European ball is more or less physical. I'm not sure. I don't watch European ball. I've heard both generalities about it, that it's more physical or it's less physical. So I can't say which one it is, but I think he'll adjust. So those two guys right there are, as advertised, they will be good. And to me, of the two, I mean, KJ, we heard about all offseason. This is the star. This is who you're building the team around. I was just most impressed. And even to an extent with the Ole Miss game, which I know didn't go well for anybody, I was impressed with just how he seems to be able to dictate the pace of the game in a Curbelo-like fashion, but he doesn't have that chicken with its head cut off kind of energy. And listen, I loved Curbelo freshman year. Sophomore year, not as much. But what I felt with KJ last night is he brings the ball across court, and there just seems, and you see this with certain point guards, this just vibe that they give off that they got this thing under control. And to me, of course, consider the opponent, but that was the feeling I got from KJ. Not reckless, not careless, just very much in control and never speeding up, right? The game just seems to come so naturally to him. There's a reason why he is projected to be a first-round pick. He looked it. He looked very good. So your two European guys, they're really good. What can you say? The story last night, Will Riley. And he looked okay in the first half. He had a few freshman mistakes. There was one where I think he stepped out of bounds. There was maybe a turnover, another turnover, whether it was a travel or... Regardless, you could see a few of the early plays in the first half for him. The speed of the game that I mentioned about KJ comes so naturally to him. Seemed like Will Riley was, oh, right, this is my first real college game. And then they go into halftime, and then they come out, and then he goes off. In just crazy fashion, I'll be honest. The second half of his barrage, I was in the car heading home and trying to avoid all these viaducts that were flooded in Champaign. It was crazy driving home last night. Every other block, there was a lake on the street. So the second half of that barrage, I'm hearing Brian Barnhart, who was struggling with some voice issues last night, but powered through with Dion. And it was as exciting listening to it on the radio as I think it would have been watching it. I watched the clips this morning of him just going off. And as I think Jacob mentions, Will Riley took one mid-range shot and made it. That was it. That was the only mid-range shot that Illinois took last night, and Will Riley made it. And you know what? As good as it looked on replay, yeah, why not? Another thing that Jacob threw out there, 46 free throws. Jacob, I don't have the box score queued up, so just remind me if that's attempted or made. But Will Riley is a 5-star. He will have games where the shot's not falling. I would imagine that he will average double digits, which seems obvious when you score as much as he did last night. But there will be games where he scores 7 or 8, right? And that's okay. I think you have enough other offensive options where he doesn't need to be a 20-point-a-game guy. And I don't think that the coaching staff foresees him as that either. But you know what? When it comes to freshman phenom type players, and I know Adam Miller had a great debut as well. What if, and I'm just kind of throwing this out there. See, I was about to say that word. Should I do it? What if we have a Carmelo Anthony situation? Now, what are the chances of that? Slim to none. Carmelo and what he did his freshman year, I don't know if we'll ever see that again. But there's a reason Will Riley was as highly touted as he was. The only question when he reclassified was, okay, he was a 5-star in that class. Is he a 4 or 5-star in this class? Well, if he adjusted the game, and then especially in the Big Ten, adjusted the physicality of it, because that will be a major difference for him. He is still a string being out there. Then I don't see any reason to think that he can't be Big Ten Freshman of the Year. I mean, why the hell not? The only thing that might preclude him from doing that is that he's not a ball handler. I don't think he'll be a starter. I think the idea is you have this platoon off the bench of guys that are really good, and I'm about to get to the other one here in a second, that give you some immediate energy after your starting 5 gets the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game. But Will Riley, damn, he looked the part. What a great stroke. Great shooting stroke. Just so smooth. So how can you not be excited? How can you not be super excited about what you saw with him? Yeah, EIU, whatever. He looked great. So those are your 3 that stood out last night, but there's a 4th. And I think this guy is going to become a major contributor to this team, maybe at the expense of somebody else. And that's Dra Gibbs-Lawhorn. For all the talk about Ty Rodgers, and understandable because Ty is one of our favorites, Dre is also a throwback. He could have easily transferred after last year. And why not? He didn't really have a role. Late in the season, he did get some tick. He made a couple big threes in that first NCAA tournament game. He played the role of defensive stopper, I thought impressively, in those NCAA tournament games. And he always played his ass off. Talk about easy guy to root for. And what I like about Dre is there is a seeming edge to his game that goes beyond the defensive intensity. He had a 3 last night in the corner, and he does that sort of like ice in your veins thing to the crowd, that motion, which is common for players now. And I like it. I like a little bit of histrionics. I like some demonstrative behavior. And I thought, I like that edge, man. I like the swagger that he plays with. Oh, and he gets 20-plus points a game now for you, or is capable of that. Now, remember last year, he had a lot of points in his debut as well. And then the season really settled in, and he was a freshman. Here's the deal. He defends. He rebounds. He can shoot the ball from deep, and he can take it to the rim, and he's a pretty good passer. So if you said, how do you poke holes in his game, it'd be much more difficult to do that now that he's got a year under his belt in this system and knows what he's doing. If I were to have a hot take from last night, and I felt this way after the exhibition game as well, I think Dre will supplant Kylin Boswell and maybe even eventually take that starting spot. Or if he doesn't take that starting spot, I think Dre will be equaling the number of minutes played by Boswell, only to surpass it as the year goes on. I just thought he looked that good. Now, on the other side of that conversation, Boswell did not look good. And this is 2 games in a row where I'm not sure if it's a feeling out process or what. You would think he is a young junior, but he has 2 full seasons of college basketball under his belt. I've been underwhelmed. And I think fans in general that have been watching this have been underwhelmed with Kylin so far. Turnover prone in a way that you wouldn't want from a steady-handed ball handler. And I know that Brad Underwood, it's interesting, he called out Kylin's defense, on-ball defense, as I think the first thing last night as a positive. Maybe I'm missing things, and I will trust Brad Underwood more than my own eyes. The guy probably knows a few things more about basketball than I do. But I didn't think Kylin's on-ball defense was great last night. The thing that was kind of keeping Eastern hanging around for the first, 14, 15 minutes of the game, their guards were fairly easily coming off of picks and nailing a bunch of mid-range shots from the free throw line. And Kylin was often the on-ball defender. I don't want to pick on him for it because even against bad teams, they're going to get there. Someone has to score for the opposing team. You are not going to hold them to 20 points. I'm realistic about that. I just thought that from what I saw across the board from Kylin, it seemed like a relatively blah performance. What are the expectations for him? I don't know. What were my expectations going in? I thought he would be someone, especially with the addition of KJ, that would have his best year yet because he wouldn't have to be the primary ball handler all the time. That he could play more off the ball, shoot some threes, which he did have a good-looking three last night in the second half. Have the ability to get to the rim, which I think we will see, but also still create for other guys. Even if KJ and him are both out there at the same time, I think that Kylin is still a pretty good facilitator when it comes down to it. Maybe he'll get comfortable with it. It's way too early to sound the alarm bells, but it just felt like, man, eye test alone, Dre pops on the court. Kylin seems to be struggling to figure out, where do I fit in all this? So the good news is this. Let's say Kylin struggles. Let's say that he is having a more difficult time figuring out his role on this team. Well, the emergence of Dra Gibbs-Lawhorn makes that far less of a concern. Because I would feel comfortable right now if he said Dre's playing 25 minutes a game. I trust his defense. He's a scorer. I think he can create some for his teammates. I just like his energy out there. And I think Brad Underwood probably does too. He seems to embody a lot of that sort of swagger that Brad Underwood wishes all of his players had. If that's the hiccup at the start of the season, we can overcome that. And if KJ is the primary ball handler anyway, and you're asking yourself, what does Kylin bring that you absolutely need? I just feel like from a shooting perspective, you have other options. From a off-guard perspective, you have other options. You can put Will Riley, if you wanted to, at the 2 in some spots. The guy can handle the ball. Would be a terrible mismatch for the other teams, too. If you want to go big, you can have Will Riley play the 2 guard. He can play 2, 3, or 4. So that'll be something to kind of keep our eyes on. Maybe it's just a situation of Kylin needs a breakout game. It would be overreacting to say an exhibition game and the first game of the regular season has demoted Kylin. But when I say my hot take is DGL is going to supplant Kylin in that role as the second guard after KJ, it is both praise of Dre and how much better he looks, and also concern with what we've seen so far from Kylin. Not to mention that Arizona, especially his sophomore year, an inconsistency was there that you were hoping when he got here would vanish. So far, though, the early return suggests that he's trying to figure things out. So we'll see. Other notes from yesterday, kind of going down the roster. Trey White looks good. I think that offensively, it's just going to be a matter of him showing that he can hit the 3. He wanted to take it to the rim. He got a few free throws, got to the line some. I think that he will figure things out. I like the look of him. He's got a bounce to his step on both sides of the court. I think defensively he's going to be a stalwart for you in a way that Ty would have been. He's just, to use that word that I use for Ivisic, live. He might be leaner than Ty. I think that just makes him more laterally quick, which is probably going to be good when it comes to guarding opposing teams' wings. Ty, much as I love him, depending on the matchup, sometimes would struggle defensively to keep guys from going around him. So I liked what I saw from Trey White. Is he going to be a star? I don't know about that. I think he will be a steady hand at the wing position. Who else? Merez Johnson. Love Merez. Love the hair. Great ovation when he came out. Deservedly so for someone that's been committed to this program for 3 years and is still it ended up being on this campus after committing for that long, and will be a fan favorite. Can't shoot free throws worth a lick. Ugh. Got to work on that, but just an easy guy to root for. I think that's cool in this day and age to still have the in-state kid that committed years ago finally show up on campus. There's still that anticipation. How good is he going to be? I mean, I think he's got through the roof potential. And the great news with getting Ivisic this year is that you don't need Merez to start. I think he's just in the perfect spot where he can play. I think he'll play 15 minutes a game for sure and be a key player on this team. He won't have the offensive skill set of a Dane Danger last year. I do think that he can make up for it defensively. He's a ball hawk. He's going to block shots. He's going to get rebounds. And as far as defensively yesterday, he didn't seem to put himself in harm's way of picking up easy fouls. That'll get tougher with bigger guys that he has to defend, but I thought Mraz looked good. I'm excited about him in particular. Kerry Booth looks the part. I mean, what's his role on this team? How many minutes does he get? That will be interesting to see. I think there'll be some games where he comes out and is capable of dropping 12 points a game off the bench. And then there's other games where he might not get much tick based on what the matchup is. But if that's a depth piece, that's fine. That'll do. Trying to see if I'm thinking of anybody, or again, all these guys are new. Starting lineup, Ivisic. Ugh, awesome. KJ, great. Trey, I trust that he'll be a solid 3. Kylin, wait and see. Oh, Benham Rickhouse. I thought in the second half started to get a little more comfortable out there. In the exhibition game, there wasn't much of an impact from him. But you see the offensive talent there. He hit a 3 or 2, if I recall. Had a couple of easy layups. Talk about steady. I think what he and Trey White bring you is the veteran transfers. Trey from a Power 5 pedigree, and Benham Rickhouse, someone that's upgraded each and every year from NAIA all the way to Illinois. Those two guys seem to me to be consistent guys that are going to play smart basketball that you can trust. You couple them with KJ and Ivisic, you can see why those 4 are slotted in the starting lineup, and I think will be for the entire year. And I think you can roll with that. Your reinforcements off the bench, give you some pop, give you some energy. I like that. Jake Davis, I guess no redshirt for him. Doesn't sound like it, so he'll get some spot minutes. And yeah, it didn't look great first game at this level and looked a little sped up, especially on a 3-pointer he took in the second half. But, God, he just reminds me, he's a spitting image of one of my friends who lives in New Orleans who has that hair. His name's Asher. Big Illini fan, too. And now my friend Asher looks like Robert Plant did back in the Zeppelin days. So I see that hair, and I just feel like it's my friend Asher out there playing basketball. Listen, all in all, that was fun. It is just exciting to feel as if you are a big boy program, and you went out and recruited like a big boy program would. And the results of that are, I think, going to be, on the whole, quite positive this year. In terms of making any sort of season predictions based off a knee-jerk reaction to a win against EIU, I'm not so sure about that, but I do think that we can count on this team having plenty of offensive firepower, and that if they figure things out defensively and can be merely serviceable, that they're going to win plenty of games. They're going to be dangerous out in March. And I think last but not least, it's the fact that this team should only get better. I mean, just seems like a fairly easy prediction to make based on the fact that this is game 1 that actually counts. Game 1 of them playing together. And there will be some road bumps along the way. I do think between the Alabama, Arkansas, and Tennessee games, they'll get one of those. And I would probably say the Tennessee game at home. If they get 2, that would be bonus. Something to keep in your back pocket before Selection Sunday in March. And the Missouri game? Come on, not worried about that. I mean, I guess we'll wait and see if Missouri got any better over the offseason. And then a bunch of cupcakes. And that was by design. You saw that a lot of the SEC teams last year that got good seeds in March Madness, they would either play a really good team in the non-conference or a crap team. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If it's about getting reps, about staying healthy, and there was that scare yesterday with Ivisic rolling his ankle, but he came back out and he's fine. If it's about getting reps, staying healthy, getting some rhythm going, play the scrubs. It's fine. I have no delusions that the schedule will get tougher. But if you don't need to play that middle-of-the-pack Colgate, why would you? Either play a quality team in the non-conference or play a scrub. And that's how they set up the schedule. And I think it will pay dividends. So going forward, 2 more games at home, SIU-E on Friday, I believe, and I forget, is it Oakland, I think, next week before you play Alabama. So you got these 3 warm-up games at home before you get your first test in Birmingham. And Alabama is top 5 for a reason. They are loaded. I know Ken Pom loves them. I'm going to be excited, though, to see, though, in a game like that, it's not going to be so much if Illinois wins. To me, it's going to be an eye test thing of, are we hanging with them athletically and on offense? And if we are in game 4 of the season doing just that against Alabama, then I'm going to feel very good going forward. If we get completely pummeled, okay, well, we can maybe still overcome that, but of course, questions will arise, as they should, if Alabama goes in there and beats by 15 points. But if you hang the part, and you look the part offensively against a team that they themselves, Alabama, are just absolutely loaded, I see no reason to not be very high on this team's prospects. And we'll get that answer, I guess, here in a week and a half, 2 weeks. As it stands, though, Election Day 2024, we got 1 game under our belt, and hope springs eternal, and for good reason. I had a lot of fun watching them last night, and I'm sure against these scrub teams I will, because they're going to score a lot of points and be pretty flashy. When the rubber meets the road against better competition, I'm going to try to caution myself, especially in the early going. And I'm sure that this team, even if they start getting things figured out, will have hiccups in January and in February when you start feeling that sort of crunch of, okay, March is around the corner. What issues do we have to address, and can we address them? But as I mentioned earlier, in a very sort of vague bit of analysis, I think skill wins out. And this team is loaded with skill. And now it comes down to coaching them up. And the fact that this is year 2 of the grand offensive experiment with Brad Underwood and then his son Tyler, that seems to be the offensive guru of sorts. Now that we're year 2 of this template of Illini basketball, if we somehow are able to plug and play these guys to a successful season, I think that also bodes well for the long-term prospects of this program and their ability each offseason to go say, we want this type of guy, this type of guy, this type of guy. Bringing them in and running it back and having success again and again and again. It's a good spot to be in. Listen, didn't get to Illini football today. I'm going to save that for later this week and have a more in-depth conversation about, okay, bye week, 3 games left. How are we feeling about it? And understandably, a bit of that energy is cooled with 2 straight losses and injuries and that feeling of, what if they fade like they did 2 years ago? But, man, you get Illinois basketball back on the court, and life is good. It just is. And, yes, I will be pissed at times during this season, and I will be pulling my hair out because of something or the other that Brad Underwood did or did not do. That's the fan in me. I'm sure you'll have moments like that too. But the early returns are promising. And I don't know. I'm going to try to embrace the process this year. That's what I'm going to try to do. And temper any anger I might have with the low points. And also not freak out and get too high with moments like last night. But damn, is it hard when you see these guys in person and see them flying around the court and just looking the part of pro-caliber basketball players. How can you not get excited? And you know what? I think in this day and age, and on Election Day of all days, yeah, get excited. Be optimistic. Be happy, for Christ's sake. Life is overall pretty good. And for Illini sports fans, it's in a better place than it has been for a long time. And Illini basketball is officially back 1-0 on the season with a dominating performance against Eastern. All right, so my plan is Thursday to do a football podcast, bye week, kind of recalibrate expectations going into the last 3. Yeah, there will be some nervous moments against Michigan State, and I'd like to win that. And I think if you do, you start feeling pretty good again about the season as a whole. And didn't talk about the Minnesota game yet. I guess I'll talk about it more on Thursday. It wasn't one that really angered me that much. I think there are plenty of reasons as to why you lost that game. And to me, is it a trend line or is it something that you can fix enough to win some games after the bye week? I think it's more the latter, and we'll talk about that on Thursday. But wanted to focus on basketball today. And now I got an entire rest of the day to just chill and wait for the election results to come in tonight. All right, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in. Hamilton Walkers, appreciate them in downtown Champaign. Steak, seafood, and spirits. Going to be hitting that up for an election night dinner myself tonight. Also got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com for any home project. Check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them, appreciate you. And we got a book. Basketball season is back, so the 200 level in Illinois Fighting Illini Basketball Fans Journey is available worldwide at Amazon. And if you're in Champaign, both Game Day Spirit locations, Jane Addams Bookstore in downtown Champaign, and The Lit in downtown Champaign. Also, for those in Ford County, Game Changer Sports Shop in downtown Paxton. Appreciate all those vendors for supporting the book. Appreciate you as well. Enjoy your election day if you can. I'm sure it'll be a late one. And, hey, this is a sports podcast, and that's about all I have to say about that. But, hey, Illinois basketball 1-0, looking good. And we'll see you Thursday, switching gears back to Illini football. It is the 200 level. All right, everybody. Appreciate it. And see you in a couple days for some football talk. I think they'll be fine. But, yes, is there that little tinge of worry? Of course. We're Illini fans. Why wouldn't there be? Take care, everybody.